And after a while, I gave up and said, if I'm going to make this, why don't I try to be myself?
I'd love for you to start with your background. How did you end up getting into private equity?
I grew up on a farm. I was the youngest boy of 4 in this family, a very classical farming family. I was on that farm every day until I was 16 years old, every day. And I was in an airplane for the first time when I was like 18 or 19 years old. So I sort of have a very sort of strange and different background. And then I accidentally ended up working for the Wallenbergs. It was a tricky journey for me in the beginning because I tried to be as smart and as informed and as good looking like everybody else. And after a while I gave up and said, if I'm going to make this, why don't I try to be myself?
How did you be yourself?
Well, try not to be somebody else, to be honest to myself, be honest to my values, my background, where I came from, and how I was different. Because I think it was clear after a while that it was a plus to be different. When you're young and when you're immature, you think that's a negative to be different because you all would like to look like everybody else.
So if we take that concept, you were at Investor AB, and then you decided to start EQT in partnership with the Wallenberg family. How did you think about making EQT the concept of be yourself?
Well, a bit the same kind of approach because EQT was started in 94. And I lived in the US 89 when KKR bought RJ Nabisco, Berger Gate, you had Drexel Burnham and the leverage financing, all things were sort of vibrant then and there. But then I came back to Europe and I felt that the way that this old classical holding company model worked, it was a bit obsolete. They were not sort of efficient. They were not sort of doing the things as good as they could do things for a number of good reasons, historical reasons, legacy reasons. And then I thought that this model that KKR and the other guys developed in the US, can't you adopt that bit to become more in line with how you are as a responsible owner of companies and run companies in a more firm and clear and focused manner than the old models, but being less financial than the versions you had in the US.
How do you balance that tension between being a responsible owner, but also generating financial outcomes, both for the business and ultimately for the end investors, the LPs?
I think it's a couple of different key components to succeed on that. Number one, you need to have a longer perspective. And you need to really care for the impact of your own doings, both in companies and around companies, and care for the consequences for the people engaged or involved. And that means that you need to be caring for the communities in which they operate and for the different stakeholders in those communities. You need to force yourself to think differently on why you are there. And that is sort of what laid the foundation for how we set up EQT, basically.
Talking about laying the foundation, the Wallenberg family, tremendous heritage in the Nordics and Europe, maybe not as well known to some in the US. How did the heritage of the Wallenberg family I think been in existence for 150 years or so before, inform how you think about this concept of long-term thinking?
So their way of doing things has been seen as a role model and a success in geographies where those kinds of approaches have been sort of the prevailing ones. In the US, the Anglo-Saxon model is very more financial. And I would say not only the US, but the Anglo-Saxon model. So the Wallenbergs have been able to find a way to operate as a family group for 5 generations by taking this long-term approach to things.
How do you think about transmitting that set of cultural values to the firm at EQT? And you've brought in other firms, BPEA, Exeter, so you've acquired other businesses. How do you think about creating that long-term view on investing in business building?
Yeah, I think that in the end, you will benefit from having a long-term view when you build businesses, even if you don't own them forever. Because everything you do in a company that have a long-term objective sits with the company and pays off over time.
So I think that's a really interesting point to unpack, because if you think about the industry, many firms are evolving and changing, and they're adding different strategies. Those strategies may be distinct and have separate cultures within their own firm's complex, but they're all under one firm. How do you think about contrasting that with as a firm deciding to stay with this single-threaded view of who you are. Why do you think that's important when it comes to the investment culture that you have and have created?
Well, they will need to make up their mind of what they actually are all about. The big firms that we are competing with and we look up to, they are good and they are smart, but they are more and more becoming asset managers. You know, in 2, 3, 4 years, you will not be able to tell the difference between BlackRock and Blackstone. You know, BlackRock eventually, when they were spun off from Blackstone, they were completely different firms. Today, they're becoming the same. KKR, Apollo, TPG, and they're doing it great, but that's not us. And one difference might also be that they have a huge home market. We don't. We cannot rely on the Swedish market of savers to build a global business. And for us to be successful and the best informed owners of companies the way we would like to be, we need to have a global approach to things. So it's a prerequisite for us to be in business.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Good. Thank you.